Let's begin in the Middle East. And 2 further hostages taken from Israel by Hamas on the 7th of October have been released. Those set free in the past couple of hours were 2 Russian Israeli women, Irina Tati, 73, on the left-hand side there, and Yelena Trepanov, 50, on the right. They were handed to the Red Cross. The Israeli military says they're now with IDF special forces inside Israeli territory. Also today, the Israeli army says it's investigating claims by Hamas that 3 hostages, including a baby, were killed in an Israeli missile strike. Hamas says 10-month-old Kafir Bibas died along with his 4-year-old brother Ariel and their mother Shiri. The whereabouts of their father Yarden remains unknown. Family members say they've been informed of the claims. On Monday, the Israeli army said the missing family members had been transferred by Hamas to another Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip and were being held in the southern city of Khan Yunis. Meanwhile, as part of these hostage releases, Israel says it's freed 30 Palestinian detainees from a detention centre in Jerusalem. Let's talk now to Mark Regev from the Israeli government spokesperson for the Israel government. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Mr. Regev, thank you once again for making the time for us. We do appreciate it. I'd like to talk, if I can, to begin with, about the Bibas family. Now, Hamas says they were killed in an Israeli airstrike, and it has said throughout this conflict that Israel's bombardment of Gaza would inevitably result in the deaths of those it was holding hostage. How do you respond to that?
Well, we're looking into it. We're investigating. Obviously, we're worried. Hamas has said all sorts of things. We had a terrorist released this week, and it was said before that she was killed, and in the end she was alive. And yet we found the bodies, our military, when we entered Gaza, we found the bodies of 2 women who were taken alive by Hamas, by the terrorists, and they were killed, we presume, by the terrorists while they were under captivity. So, of course, we're worried, and especially since this is the youngest of the hostages. Kafir Bibas was taken when he was 8 months old. And you have to ask, what sort of people are we dealing with? Who is Israel's enemy here? People who kidnap babies. And the important thing to remember here is he was taken hostage. He was abducted before he could walk or talk. And I think this encapsulates what Hamas is all about. We really are fighting fanatical extremists who have no sense at all of decency.
Mr. Regev, what can you tell us about the hostage release and prisoner release that's ongoing at the moment?
So we've accepted a framework that was negotiated with the help of the Americans, and we thank President Biden for his assistance in this, whereby we've agreed to the extension of the humanitarian pause, and 10 hostages are going to be released every day for the extension, and what has been understood is that this will happen for the next 2 days. But Israel is willing to continue with this framework. From our point of view, the humanitarian pause can continue as long as Hamas continues to release hostages. And those people who want to see the continuation of the pause, and there are many of them in the international community, so the address is clear. It's Hamas. Pressure must be placed on Hamas. If they continue to release hostages, then the pause can continue.
Meanwhile, there has been Israeli military activity in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian sources there say that 2 children were killed by Israeli gunfire. What happened there?
So I don't have the details, and I apologize. I do know what we're doing. You have, unfortunately, across the West Bank, you have Hamas cells, other terrorist cells, and they've wanted to do the sort of violence that we saw Hamas commit on October 7th. In other words, a fear that they want to bring about an overall escalation, that they want to come into Jewish communities, whether on the West Bank or on the Israeli side of the Green Line, and massacre people. And so Israel has been very energetically preempting. We've been arresting Hamas and other activists in the middle of the night. Sometimes there are gunfights, sometimes people are killed. But the most important thing is we want to prevent this sort of Hamas terrorism, and so far we've been successful precisely because we have been proactive. We've been taking the fight to the terrorists, and we've been dealing with the threat.
Going back to the topic of a truce, talks ongoing at the moment, which you mentioned earlier. We're in the final few hours of this stage of the agreement. What is Israel looking for to secure its involvement in an ongoing truce?
So theoretically, we're still waiting for people to be released tonight, and we never count our chickens before they're hatched. Yes, we still have to see 10 hostages on Israeli soil later tonight. Then, as has been done in the past, we should be receiving a list later tonight and possibly in the early hours of the morning, which will say who is to be released tomorrow. And that means we can know that this process of the pause is bringing back our people, and it can continue. After that, once again, we are prepared to continue on the assumption that Hamas commits to further releases. Without further releases, the humanitarian pause will end.
The United Nations says 45% of homes in Gaza, so not military establishments, not command centres, people's homes have been damaged or destroyed in Israeli military activity. That's according to the UN. The UN Secretary General says disease is now the biggest risk for people in Gaza and that they need a true humanitarian ceasefire. Is Mr. Guterres going to get from Israel what he wants?
Well, he already called, as you know, 3-4 weeks ago for a humanitarian ceasefire. And let's be frank, had we agreed then, we would never have got any of our hostages out. And so far, what we've had altogether, what is it, close to 60 people out? They would all still be in Hamas prison. They'd still be abducted. They'd still be, if we had agreed then to a ceasefire. And that's why we conditioned this sort of humanitarian pause on getting our people out.
And finally, because I appreciate you're tight for time, Mr. Regev, during the 1990s, when the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was involved in the Wye River Memorandum, he talked about a road to permanent peace. I appreciate that was a long time ago. Do you think that is something which is still being considered by Mr. Netanyahu?
100%. Look, Hamas has to be understood. It's not just a vicious enemy of Israel, but it's also a fanatical enemy of any peace and reconciliation between Israelis and Arabs. They've always been opposed. They say so in their charter. They say any Arab leader who makes peace with Israel is a traitor to the Arab world and to the Muslim faith. They say that Israel has no right to exist, not in any borders. They say every Jew is a legitimate target for their murderous terrorists. And so you take the most violent and extreme enemy of peace, and if you defeat him, I believe that there can be more moderate voices that will fill the vacuum. And I also say the following. We've seen how the Arab world has responded to Hamas's violence. We know that in Arab capitals across the Middle East, there's not a lot of tears for Hamas, and I think once Hamas is defeated, and we will defeat them decisively, I think you'll see the circle of peace between Israel and the Arab world continue to expand, and we'll see new relationships with more Arab countries. Ultimately, once again, you defeat the most violent enemy of peace. That creates room, that creates oxygen for the more pragmatic and moderate forces to fill the void.
OK, Mark Regev, Senior Advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister. Mr. Regev, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Rich.